Your Partner in Success Radio is a free business podcast with host Denise Griffitts. It's all about great stories, conversation, and context to help you move your business and life forward with actionable tips and advice from her guest experts. To listen and subscribe, just find us on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you consume your podcasts.
Good morning, and today on Your Partner in Success Radio, I am thrilled to welcome back Dr. Greg Stewart. He is an author, a licensed professional counselor, an expert in emotional intelligence and relational health. Dr. Stewart, I'm going to call him Greg going forward because we're friends now, holds both a PhD and an MDiv, Master of Divinity, and he brings a rare blend of clinical insight and spiritual sensitivity to his work with couples. Now, he has been on the show before, but today we are talking about his powerful new book, I Cubed for Couples, Facing Our Negative Emotions to Build Intimacy in Marriage. And in this insightful and deeply compassionate guide, I just read it and reviewed it, Greg introduces us to the I Cubed method: identify, interpret, and intervene. And it's a practical framework designed to help couples confront and work through the emotional barriers that often, way too often, sabotage intimacy. So, what makes his approach so effective, honestly, is its honesty. He doesn't sugarcoat. I can't talk today, Greg. Sorry. He does not sugarcoat the discomfort that comes with emotional growth, but he offers a safe and structured way through it. And his writing and clinical practice are rooted in real world experience and delivered with warmth, a lot of warmth. This book is not about quick fixes. It's an invitation to do the real work of building emotional safety and authenticity in your relationship. So here's the thing, whether you're just starting out or decades into a partnership, this conversation will offer clarity, tools, and encouragement for building a more connected, emotionally intelligent marriage. And I wanted to mention before we get too far, his books are available on Amazon. I have both of his books, and we'll talk about that. But if you're a Kindle Unlimited subscriber, you can read both of his titles at no cost, and I suggest that you do. I have the physical books. I also have the Kindle books. And be sure to check out our previous episode, Embracing Emotional Intelligence, with Dr. Greg Stewart, for more wisdom from this extraordinary guest. Greg, thank you. Welcome back to Your Partner in Success Radio.
And thank you, of course, for having me again, Denise. And yes, I feel like we're friends now.
I know we are. And on top of everything else, we've had to reschedule more than twice, and you're so patient with it, and thank you.
Well, vice versa. I mean, I think it was my issue. But anyway,
Yeah, it
we're
was both
gracious
of
towards
us.
each other. How about that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was both of us. Listen, it's always a pleasure to have you here, and your work, and I have to say this from the heart, your work continues to resonate so deeply with my audience and with me personally, because you approach really complex emotional topics with both clarity and compassion. So before we dive into your latest book, I'd love to start with a personal question. I ask many of my questions, and that is this: how do you like to show up in the world, whether it's in your work, your relationships, or your writing?
Um, the way I like to show up is, well, it matches my personality and my ADHD, is extremely energetic and passionate. Because I like the phrase "fully alive." I want to
Hmm.
show up fully alive because people, all of us, go through very difficult experiences, and life is tough. I mean, the world's a tough place, but just like with my books, I want to empower people to basically take control over their negative emotions and take all the power away from the environment. And that passion and energy and drive that I have hopefully assists them or helps them, be that catapulting force to drive them to that independence and autonomy, which will then lead them to that fully alive experience that I have.
And I love that. And your first book, I mean, I've read it multiple times. I read it, I reviewed it, I read it again. I have thousands of books in this room in my office, and every single book in this room was gifted to me by people like you, and I've read all of them. But I have to say that the bookcase closest to my desk is where the ones live that I'm going to be digging into a lot. I'm grabbing for them. I don't have to go hunt for them. you're on the third shelf. So you're close
Mm,
to my desk.
awesome. That's very kind of you.
It's a great book. I mean, both of them. Both of your books are great, and you have a new one coming out.
Yeah, I'm working on IQ for leaders because I mean I'm a counselor, coach, executive coach and consultant. So in my world of both in the psychobabble side of counseling, helping individuals as well as couples, but I've done a lot of executive coaching in my life. My PhD was in counseling, but my dissertation was on emotional intelligence as it relates to job satisfaction and organizational commitment. So I've had this a beautiful career, honestly, very grateful for it of, being a pastor, a counselor, a coach, adjunct professor, because it's really just from the whole spectrum. I use negative 10 to positive 10 of helping people across the whole spectrum of those who are just experiencing the worst part of their lives, the negative 10, or couples that are on the verge of divorce, to people like helping people maximize their gifts, talents, and abilities on the positive side of the number line. It's been a huge blessing.
It, and I can hear that in your voice. I cubed. Where did that come from? What does that mean?
um as far as like it's about 20, 25 years old, and just in the way my brain works, as far as I say one of my skills is making the complex simple, is just the linear process of coming up with a simple way in order to kind of check our emotion, because in we think, we feel, then we do, right? So that's cognitive behavioral. Our minds think thoughts, those thoughts and opinions turn into emotional energy, and then that emotional energy turns into action, right? So I cubed information, interpretation, intensity. I like it unto the Panama Canal, and I always actually put that chapter at the end of my books because it's like the summary. I go through all this deep dive process, whether it be with individual counseling or couples or now leaders, and we do a deep dive into that, but say, so here's the summary at the end of iCube. So information is like the Panama Canal, where you have to, wait until one lock fills up before the second lock opens. And the first lock is information. So it's the rule that it's illegal for me. I like using that word illegal because it makes a punch. It's illegal for me to have any opinion, which is my interpretation, or any emotion intensity until I have all the information. And just literally that one principle alone, if I could, we could live in the world of Matrix and I just download that one principle into every human being on the face of the earth, think about how different our world would be is if we did not have any emotion or any response or action to it until we had all the information, just that one piece alone. So that's like sets me at pause, like, because I don't want to prejudge things. Like there's a proverb that says, he who answers a matter before he hears the whole story, it's a fool in his folly. And because there's just more information, I can't jump to conclusions. The second lock is interpretation. And that basically holds our emotions at bay in this way, where the key question is there any other way of looking at it? So when obviously if we're processing this, we're already in the negative, right? So I'm upset, I have negative emotions, but is there any other way of looking at it? Doesn't mean it negates or deletes the way you your initial opinion, but there's other ways of looking at it, because we've all heard people be really upset and kind of vent to us, but we ourselves look at their story or hear their story, and we're like, well, I mean, that's kind of like the way things go. So we're neutral about it, but yet they're super upset. So we need to kind of adopt the same thing, that there's a neutral way of looking at it, like this is what it is, or there's a positive way of looking at it, meaning how can we reframe this to where there is the way we turn, kind of turn this pain into something powerful. There's several sentences that are all true, and that's the key. Again, that my initial interpretation of negative could be true, but there's also several neutral or positive way of looking at it. So the conglomeration of all the sentences to the information, once I have it all, is the right way of thinking about it. But then that automatically kind of turns into the third one, which is intensity. So basically, what is the most effective, the most efficient, the most rational, healthy, wise, and right? I use that all the time. RHWR, the most rational, healthy, wise, and right way to respond to this. And that's honestly the Panama Canal. There's like 3 locks that go to the top. And then once you're at the top and you can see everything, that's what's the most effective way to respond to this. And then you burn that emotional energy, because emotion is energy, as you go down the other 2 locks onto the other side. So I cubed is like that simple process by which we can kind of apply the rest of the material in our given situation, whether it be ourselves or whether it be with our loved ones or obviously in leadership.
And that makes sense. And while you're talking about the Panama Canal, I don't watch TV. I very rarely watch TV. In fact, if I decide I'm going to watch something on Amazon Prime, I have to look at my remote and get reacquainted with it. I just don't watch it. But I came across a show and I was thinking about you because you talk about the Panama Canal and it's about narrow boats. And I don't know, I can't remember now what I think it was 14 or 15 different years that they did it, but it's an actress and her husband who was an actor, Prunella Scales, Faulty Towers. Anybody remember Faulty Towers? I hated that show. She was the wife in there, and she was suffering from dementia. And her and her husband, who passed away about a year ago, spent a lot of time, many, many years, on narrow boats going up and down the waterways of Britain. And they talk a lot about the locks and patience and taking the time to kind of reassess what you're thinking while you're waiting for that lock to fill up. So that
Absolutely.
that made a lot of sense to me, and it kind of became in a way how I'm viewing things because I can get very impatient, very. I mean, to the point where I live alone and I still think it's obnoxious. I still make
Huh.
myself irritable. So now I'm thinking about you're waiting for the lock.
Yeah.
Get to the next lock, then by the time I'm to the third lock, I'm fine. I'm calmed down. So
Yeah.
it's
And
a mental exercise for me, I guess is what I'm saying.
very, very much so. And we all know, like, when people, again, they come to us with a lot of emotional energy. So go objective and subjective. And I like using the phrase, look, I'm not going to take your monkey, meaning that they come to us with a problem. It's almost like and we start feeling this negative oppression from their negative energy,
Hmm. Yeah.
and they want us to respond. And I'm just going to sit there and pause. And they're sitting there waiting for me to answer, respond. But by pausing, it just puts a stop to that emotional energy, and then it starts to decrease. Well, I want to do the same thing personally, subjectively inside of me. Like, no, I'm not going to respond to this. This situation is not going to decrease my quality of life, right? Because the negative emotion that we carry day in and day out, it's killing, it's decreasing our quality of life. So I'm like, I'm not going to experience this negative emotion. Now, I mean, of course, if it's valid, I use the phrase "nothing bothers me unless it should." So there's things that should bother us. I'm not
Oh
saying total
yeah.
passivity,
All
but it's a
right.
matter of having the right amount. So by pausing and waiting for that lock to fill up, it's recognizing, because there's been so many times that I've prejudged something or just gave a impulsive response to it, and then when I got more information, lo and behold, my opinion changed, everything changed. I was like, okay, well, if I would have had that information, well, that's the point. There's always more information forthcoming, and it's just that negative energy that sits inside of us. By pausing, it gives me the control, because it is about achieving the highest quality of life and taking and having peace and having control and power, because there's so much outside of our control. This is a way for us to reclaim that power and control.
Very much. And I don't know about you. I have been most of my life and can still do it. Be very much a knee jerker. Not my monkeys, not my zoo. Leave me alone. I can get pretty
Right.
irritable. I shouldn't say that on the radio, should I? It's the truth. But I've had to learn, I've had to teach myself to sit with it, pause, wait for the lock to fill up. That's my new thing. I love that. But if I didn't do that, oh man, I would be in constant hot water. Seriously.
Very much so. And well, I mean, I have been in a lot of hot water over and over again. And
I
then
think we all do.
yeah. So first you have this negative emotion from the initial event or experience, but then there's the inflated negative emotion that we have from the processing after the fact, right? And then we
Oh, yeah.
respond to it and we create more pain, which, obviously with couples, we create more pain. and now we've got to have a conversation or do some work to recover from the pain from responding to the initial pain. And we do that enough. I mean, I'm 54 now. I don't care about sharing my age. I'm 54 now. So at some point, Greg, hopefully you can start to get an idea that this is not working.
Right.
And I'm tired of causing other people pain. I'm tired of causing myself pain. And all it is, it's basically just responding impulsively. And it's just going with that first blush response of my mental model, because my mental model is doing its job. It's not its fault. It's just saying, here, Greg, think this, feel this, and do this. But recognizing that the formulas in my mental model are simply a conglomeration of my DNA, my life experiences, and my choices, which again is how our mental models are formed. It's not bad, but it's always lacking information, number one. And secondly, our mental models have formulas that are a little skewed. So just that is every situation by definition that's always the case. But especially if you have negative emotion initially, that's where I say stop and then figure out what that negative emotion is exposing in you first, because your mental model is producing that negative emotion out of self-protection or self-promotion because we want to have our way, but it could be based in faulty information or messed up formulas, which is the interpretation. So we have to pause and be wise and be emotionally intelligent, and then there is the healthiest way to respond to it.
Well, I have to ask you this because a lot of it, we're in conversations or somebody just smacked the back end of our car and we're all upset. How do you pause in what can be fairly heated moments? How do you pause without looking like you're the village idiot? Do you just hold up a finger and say, hang on, let me think about this? Do you?
Right.
I
Well, I
do.
mean,
I've been
what you
known to
can
do that.
do.
It's like, hang on, hang
Well,
on.
actually, that's. I mean, now think about through all the situations, because in most situations, it doesn't all culminate in a moment. There's always time, because there's
No.
always the first initial. So I say the thing to recognize, like, because emotions are on our surface, right? So we know what we're feeling, especially if it's negative emotion. So it's easy. I simply say, anytime you feel negative emotion, that is your screaming voice that says stop, because that negative emotional energy more than likely is inflated in some way, shape, or form.
And it's going to
And
bite you
so,
right in the butt. I've had that happen.
yeah, yeah, well, and we all have, and especially where the areas that we're the most sensitive and where we feel the most exposed is with our partners and our spouses or what have you, where because we've opened up our heart and soul to this person, so they have a lot of power over us. And our partners can, I talk about everything we do is in achieving an emotional goal. There's a micro emotional goal of what I want to feel here and now, but then there's the macro emotional goal of quality of life, living our values and such. So I say that a man's main emotional goal is significance or respect or success, and a woman's main emotional goal is safety and security. So when we feel that our or anybody is blocking that emotional goal, we use that negative energy to remove the obstacle, our spouse, from the pathway that we're using to achieve that emotional goal, and that's what we have to stop, because we're going to cause further damage. Right now, it doesn't mean that my negative emotion towards my wife is invalid. But if I was to go off of batting averages, I would not. I would get fired from the baseball team, right? Where my wife's
Ouch.
batting average is much higher, right? I'll just give her that credit. But it doesn't mean
Yeah.
it's wrong. It just means that I have to pause because of that, again, that inflation. On a scale of 1 to 10, what she did or didn't do, whatever, didn't meet my expectations. It's on a 1. Like, how big of a deal truly is this? But I am at a 6, 7, and 8. And that's always a process where as soon as you feel negative emotions, you've got to pause and, let's say, even go through the IQ process. Do I have all of the information? Because you're doing a lot of prejudgments, obviously, towards your spouse. You start judging their motives, you start judging their character. And that's where we have to pause and go back into the house of our heart and figure out that, my inflated emotion is not my wife's issue, it's mine.
How difficult is that for people to do? I mean, one of the questions that I have is why is it so hard for couples to face their negative emotions together? I have a theory. It's because we're very different critters. I'll be honest with you, I don't see why people have to live together. I really don't. But I'm a highly committed introvert, and marriage to me is just scary. I've been married, hated it. I'll never do it again. But I also didn't understand, and this is on me, I didn't understand how we could be so incredibly different and still cohabitate. I still don't get it.
Yeah, and so as far as like, our macro emotional goal is quality of life, right? So some people like their quality of life is to be single because obviously, as a former pastor and the Bible even says a lot of people notice that, that marriage, I mean, there is going to be struggles in marriage, but the other side of it is that God designed that so every relationship is about safety and pursuit, right?
Hmm.
So like even our relationship, right? So when we're going back and forth via email trying to figure out the time, it's safety meaning, hey, like I want you to feel safe that, I'm not mad at you, you're not mad at me. And then pursuit meaning we keep emailing until we figure it out. That's pursuit. Every relationship is about safety and pursuit. Now, at the core of our heart, that the way God created marriage, that there is an experience within marriage of safety and pursuit that cannot be duplicated anywhere else. So that's what I think, people want to be in a relationship because that there is that deeper level of safety. Like when my wife asked me a few years ago, I mean, what do you like most about our marriage? And I was surprised because, I'm surprised I didn't say, Denise, because you're hot, right? Pretty shallow guy, right?
Yeah,
But I,
you would
I
have
immediately
gotten hit with a
responded with,
potato. Somebody would have tossed a potato at your head. I would have.
I didn't, I didn't respond, so my first thing I said is I'm safe with you because, in relation,
Oh,
I just want to be safe. Like, look, I will own it. I screw up and whatever, make mistakes. But man, I just want to be safe. Can I just be myself? And then there's pursuit, meaning there's that feeling of not only are you worth it, I am excited and I'm passionate about making you excited and passionate. And again, there's always levels, right? There's always levels, but at marriage, I think that's the goal. It's that there's a level of depth and a level of passion that we experience that we don't experience anywhere else. But along with that, what we often know is that there's a lot of pain too. So the first thing I do when a couple comes in, I do mainly telehealth, but it come to my office, if you will. I point out the fact and I say, I know it's rhetorical, but would you just answer this question? I say to the guy, do you want your wife to be 100% emotionally, relationally safe in your heart? Well, of course I do. I ask the wife the same question. Do you want your husband to be emotionally, relationally safe in your heart? Of course I do. I said, okay, you both want that. So that is the real you. So when you guys don't feel safe with each other, that's the foreigner. That's the anomaly. That's not you. So I'm going to equip you, more effectively, based in like what you're feeling individually, but also on communication skills, because know in your heart you want each other to be safe. And then I say when about pursuit, that we want each other to feel pursued, that I do the negative 10 to positive 10, that the positive 10 side of relationship is where we both say, man, I've never been loved like this before. And I say that I really believe with all my heart that when you guys are at your best, like remember the wedding day and the day after, everybody says, man, I'm so in love with you. I want the rest of our lives to be just like it is today. Now, we're not naive to think that there's ups and downs, but it's about the degree of the ups and downs. So we committed. We want when we're at our best, that's who we really truly are. So again, when we're not doing our best, that's the anomaly. So equip each other to get to where we want to be, and it is possible. But I understand where you're coming from, the sense of people just get jaded, they get hurt and like negative and positive, they just kind of sit there at 0 or +1. But I do believe with all my heart that not only do all of us want to experience that positive, 7, 8, 9, 10 type of relationship, I believe with our heart of hearts, we also want to give it. That we all, we're at our peak in relationship, I want my wife to feel this way all the time and vice versa. But, you know, as we would say in Christianity, that we're sinful, we make mistakes, we hurt each other, but then it's about how do we recover from it. but I do understand where you're coming from in the sense of, man, it's just so hard. Is it worth it? Because I mean, honestly, to find a guy who thinks like this or to find a woman who's willing to go there, like it is tough. It's hard because people don't think like this. They don't, because I say that, that positive 6 to positive 10 zone, it's that we outserve each other. I say in that zone, positive 6 to positive 10 of marriage, of I have no rights. Whatever my wife wants, she gets. Right.
That's
And
just wrong. It really
well,
is.
it's obviously it's in measurement, right? Because when we're
Right, right.
both have a mindset of servanthood, when we both have a mindset of, you know, even life is not about Greg. Life is about me adding to the world, right? So obviously there's boundaries. I'm not saying obviously we know there's boundaries, but when it comes to my mission to maximize my life is whatever she wants, she gets. But she's not going to, if we love each other, there's not going to be a
She's
need to
not going to
discuss
abuse
boundaries.
it. Right. I
Yes.
understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then you're going to come across people like me who are highly committed introverts. And honestly, and I'm not joking, I need to be left completely alone at least 97% of the time. And I mean
Mm.
completely alone. I'm not shy. I don't have any filters and I don't dislike people, but I need to be left alone. And I finally figured that out.
Yeah, and you know what? And there are people who are like that, and that's completely okay. So
Oh, it
it's
is.
not
Yeah, it
like,
is for
yeah,
me. For the longest kind of time, I thought, Denise, what is wrong with you?
yeah, for sure.
Everything is such a problem. Everything's such work. I'm so miserable. And let me tell you, true woman, if I'm miserable, everybody around me is too. So I just decided to opt out of that. And I have never been happier or more content. I will never marry again. It
Yep,
doesn't mean that I think it's wrong
yep,
for anybody. It's just not right for me.
yeah, for sure. And yeah, and again, it's not wrong. I mean, even the Bible talks about that. It's actually, they call it a gift. It's the gift of celibacy, and why? Because I mean, it's a gift where you don't need that partnership. So again, both are good, right? And either you
Well, you
have it or
just
you
have to know who
don't.
you are. I think
Yeah,
that's the big part. Who am I? How do I show up in this world? And if I'm in a relationship or a marriage that I am absolutely wretched in, what good am I doing anybody?
yeah. Right. Well, and that's the funny thing is you said the key phrase of, if I am in a marriage where I am no good in, but obviously because of our selfishness, the reason why this marriage isn't working is because of you, and people
Yeah.
don't take a look at. And you
No,
mentioned that,
it's me. I know
yeah,
well, it's both, but for the
yeah,
most
it's
part, it
both,
was
yeah.
me. I was just wretched.
And when people have you asked the question earlier as far as the negative emotions, and the reason why is because, like I say that I always kind of get this picture of behind us is the house of our heart, and we're standing on the front lawn, protecting and guarding it, and in front of us, facing our house, are all the things in life causing us negative emotions. So it is an auto response that, if because I have emotional goals, and the things in front of me are blocking those emotional goals. So it is an auto response that I'm going to look outside of me, um, to kind of put the blame, or honestly then put the solution is they change in order for me to feel better. That is auto response. But it's the wise one who then realizes, like you said, it's a both and
Yeah.
I need to stop and ensure that I'm not bringing any junk or lies or whatever to the table first before I address that very legitimate thing. And so that's why I think it's so hard for people is negative emotions automatically, they burn energy trying to remove the obstacle to their emotional goal. It's just such an auto response. But the wise in heart will stop and realize that, it's just a matter of being humble and teachable, that there might be something, like I say in the books, that all negative emotion is exposing something in me. I got to figure out what's being exposed in me first, right? Is there insecurity? Is there, like, bad past experience, whatever it is? And so in my couples book, as I'm equipping them, sometimes I say literally, look, you may need to put this couples book down first and go back to my first book and deal with the individual stuff, because your spouse does not deserve the amount of negative emotions you're giving them. And the reason why is because you got stuff going on inside of you, your own identity, value, and worth, or your own insecurities, your own emotional management. That is your issue. And honestly, you're not going to be able to, improve your marriage until you deal with your stuff first. And that is absolutely crucial, but it really takes the person who is willing to just like own it and say, that's why I say when you had negative emotions, you got to put down the microscope and pick up the mirror, right? That is a choice. That is a choice of humility. That's a choice of teachability. But honestly, it's the only way you can grow, because the teachability and humility is the gateway. You have to walk through that gateway and recognize that, hey, my mental model is goofy. It's right, it's good in a lot of areas, but it's goofy and wrong in areas. I got to figure out where, because again, where my formulas are off, where my interpretations are off, that is not anybody else's issues but mine. But that takes a person who's willing to really own it and say, yes, I've got to figure this out first, and then I can see to address it with other people. It's
And I,
definitely a process.
right. And I'm so glad you brought that up because honestly, if we don't kind of tend to ourselves first and figure out why we're mad or we're spitting mad about something or we're knee jerking or we're just meh, blah, just, and a lot of people just kind of shut down. I see it. They're just shut down. They're just kind of coasting, "Oh, one day I'll die. Okay." I've actually seen people do that, and I'm like, why? Why do you
Yeah.
want to live like that? What is in you that is blocking you so profoundly that you're just putting in your time and waiting to die?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's really, I think, a problem in our culture that they make their emotional state contingent upon the environment, pursuing them, validating them, or what have you. It's just, and they can't feel better until someone outside of them helps them feel better. So it's almost like, look, I don't think much of myself. I don't have a high value and worth. So hey, I'm experiencing a vacuum, so I need you to fill it because I can't. And that that makes, oh my goodness, what a mess. It makes that your, value and worth, your happiness contingent upon somebody else outside of you that you don't have control over taking up that responsibility. And secondly, my goodness, it's never going to get solved because nobody,
No,
right?
not even close to it. I mean, listen, I like people a lot. I like people just fine. I like to meet people like you on my podcast. I just don't want to physically be around a lot of people because it wears me out. It really does,
Mhm.
physically and
Yep.
emotionally and spiritually. It
Yep.
just drains me. But I figured that out some time ago, a long time ago, actually. And I've made my life work around it instead of just being out there going, "Oh, hi, how y'all doing? I hate that." I was miserable doing that. Now I'm all happy. So I knew what to do to create my own happiness. But you're right. You have to go back. What's in it? What's blocking you? I mean, I watched my grandmother, who was a just unhappy woman, seriously unhappy. And I watched her and I didn't like her because I knew there was something wrong with her.
Mm.
And I knew anytime I got around her, she just drained me. But turned out she was probably bipolar, but she was a depressed personality, one of the unhappiest people I've ever met in my life. And I have made it a point in my life to be as far away from her personality as she's dead. But I don't want to be anything like her. And every once in a while, I'll catch myself doing it's like, no, 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 Denise, knock it off. I'll catch it and just reject it.
Yeah. And so there's different, like with the trauma that people like, I call it wounded, bitter, entitled, that, when people go through very difficult experiences, they kind of are wondering because something outside of them rocked their world. Again, the first initial blush is fair, but
Gotcha.
then they start asking like, why this happened, why this happened. Then the key difference is I've seen people who heal go from the external locus or location of control to the internal, and they make a choice. I've got to respond to this. I've got to heal. I've got to figure this out. But people who don't, then what they lost now defines them. And once they just now everything in life they view through this lens of what I lost now defines me. So it's they're wounded, but then they start becoming bitter because everything else, like a stoplight or somebody gets their order
Right.
wrong at Burger King, it's all through that lens. See, there we go again. So they become bitter, then
Right.
they become entitled, like the world owes me something. But again, it's miserable because you're basing your peace, your value and worth upon the environment.
But Greg, all of these are fixable and if I'm understanding you correctly and reading your books properly, if we are willing to, number one, recognize that we have issues that are basically just our own. Nobody cares about it unless you do something that ticks them off so bad they try to run over you with their car.
Right.
But, we can fix what's going on if we're aware. But is awareness as difficult for a lot of people that it seems to be?
Well, I don't think it's awareness because again, I always going to default back to, do you know when you have negative emotions? Well, of course I do. Okay, there's your
Yeah.
awareness.
Yeah, I
There's your
do.
awareness. There's your gate, right? So it's a matter of switching from external to internal. That's the choice. So it's they're aware of the negative emotions, but they have to make a choice because again, it's when you say something to me that pushes my buttons. Like in the first book, you remember like the girls at the residential treatment center. It's like, Dr. Greg, she's pushing my buttons. I said, well, uninstall your buttons. What are those buttons? They're insecurities. That can you say something to me about me that's going to trigger me, if you will, and I'm going to feel bad about myself? Well, yes, but I'm going to say no because I make the choice that if I have a particular weakness, I either, if it's fixable, I work on it. Because again, you being able to expose a weakness in me that I can fix is not your issue. I'm the one giving you material. And so,
Oh, say that
right?
again. You
So
say that
if
again. That was important.
if there's a weakness I have that I am in charge of fixing, and you pointed out the issue isn't the fact that you pointed it out. The issue is I gave you material to use against me. So, but when you say that to me and I'm working on it, this is my identity van work chapter. I'm saying you're absolutely right. That is my weakness, and this is what I'm doing to work on it. There's no exposure. That's what insecurity is. It's something I don't like about myself, which is not the issue. We always have that. It's a matter of that we don't want it exposed. Somebody's shining a light on it. So when you shine a light on it, I get defensive and I try and cover it up. Well, why are you trying to cover it up? I mean, it's not like you're going to hide it. Matter of fact, it's your response to it. And then you're focusing on why they pointed out. Why did they point it out? Instead of, I own it. Right. So you have to make the choice it's always about rational, healthy, wise, and right being truthful. That is a weakness. But again, there's either it's true, but I don't want to own it, or it's not true, but I'm responding as if it were, which if it's not true, then why have any emotion about it? And so people have to, that's the choice. So it's awareness of the negative emotions and then making the choice of my issues are not the fault of other people. So well, let's just work on it and grow and mature and in the process. And that's so crucial, not only as individuals, because we take ourselves everywhere, but also in our marriages, that our spouse points out something and we get defensive. And then my mother, what about your mother? Well,
Oh,
why don't you
no.
just own the fact that your mother's difficult, right? And just agree, right? But you feel like they're pointing something out like it's your fault, and it's not. So it's just owning, figuring out what is actually being exposed in me, and that I have the ability to either own it or it's I don't need my wife to pursue or validate me. I want her to, but I don't need her to, right? Because I am worth being pursued. I am worth being loved. And if she is choosing not to validate that, then that's kind of on her. Now we talk about it, but it's about the degree of negative emotion. Just I can't overstate. Take away the inflation. I have negative emotion because legitimately, truthfully, my wife should or should not do blank, and vice versa. I should or should not do, but it's the amount of negative emotional energy that inflation is what is the issue that we got to figure out. And a lot of times it comes from that inflation that we're believing lies about the situation. Again, I'm judging her character motives, or the inflation comes from I'm taking it personally. Like my value and worth is has been just decreased because my wife says that I'm weak at this. I mean, come on. Or it could be from a bad past experience that my wife is exposing, and my mental model is going, oh no, here we go again. You got to protect yourself when I actually don't. So we got to kind of deal with our stuff. And when we go through marriage and recognizing that, um, also figuring out that, okay, we're going to work through communication because 99.9% of arguments in marriage are from a misunderstanding. And those misunderstandings come in non-verbally, right? So Denise, this is how you came across. And you're like, no, I didn't. Well, how do you prove how you came across, and then how you came across that my furnace kicks on and I get triggered by how you came across. And what it is you think that I'm dot dot dot. It's major misunderstandings. And that's what causes so many. So if we just clear up the misunderstanding, because how many times have I said to a spouse, look, if she fully understood everything that you're thinking on this topic, would she have an issue? No. Okay. Well, if you understood 100% what she was thinking, would you? No. Okay. Well, then it's a communication issue because we go from brain
Right.
to mouth to ears to brain. There's going to be a mix up there somewhere. So the mastery is in clarity and feeling heard. Because once we feel heard, it's like, oh yeah, because yeah, I agree with you. Okay, so what do we do about it? And it's being able to set our emotions aside, our self-protection and our self-promotion aside, because I'm gonna stick with, if I fully understood where my wife was coming from, I would get her. So going back, negative emotion, be aware of that, which is easy to do. Then it's making a choice to figure out what's being exposed in me first, what's going on inside of me, and then in the interpersonal, mastering that communication process, which there's tons of techniques in my book, in order to feel heard by one another. Then you find out, how simple it is to solve problems. Because say, look, you guys are smart people. If you guys came across a problem you weren't emotional about, you just solve it. So if we take care of the emotion, we're smart people, we can solve problems. But it's that emotion, because we take things personally, because I'm insecure, Denise. I'm super insecure. So I need you to make sure and tell me how awesome I am so I don't feel insecure anymore. Well, my insecurity is my issues, and you are not responsible to make me feel secure.
No, and you just gave me permission to kick you around the block. So you never want to do you never want to do something like that. But kind of going back to and you said something I wrote down. It's like, well, you came across like this. I used to knee jerk about something like that. Man, really? Now I will stop and just look at this person and say, well, that's what you think. It's not how I meant it. Next.
Yeah,
I just don't
right.
tolerate it.
Right. And so the thing, it's because we always like say, well, I didn't mean it that way. So I say, okay, try this. So if I came across that way to you, I did not mean to. So here's the key. Let me delete it, and then let me replace it with this, because this is what I really think. So it's in the misunderstanding realm. Or let's just say you, I'll put the credit on you. Let's say that you say it beautifully. You say it perfectly. You came across and you spoke the truth in love, but it was me. I received it poorly because of my own insecurities or whatever.
Right.
Even though you said it perfectly, I said, well, you think that you came across, you still would say, hey, if I came across that way, because again, there's no way to prove it. I did not mean to. So let me delete it and then restate it this way. And honestly, you might restate it the exact same way you did originally, but now because it's like you clarified, right? I call it instant clarification. That's technique. Let me delete that and
Hmm.
replace it with, because when that replacement is what creates the impact. Even, and you could have said say the exact same thing you said before, but it's like, man, don't want to come across that way. Let me delete it and replace it with. It's that replacement, that deletion and replacement, that is what actually makes the impact. So the misunderstanding is cleared up.
See, I would have never thought of that. But then, I'm kind of a pig-headed person. I think you figured that part out. It's like,
Right.
really? You didn't
Right.
like that? Well, let me double down on it. But
Right.
I really am not that bad. I have been, but I'm really not that bad. But it seems to me, listening to you and reading your books, that we need to, as individuals, we need to have some EQ, emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
but we also need to kind of delve deeply into our critical thinking skills.
Yeah. Yeah, the critical thinking is, if I could summarize, because in my leadership book, one of my, I have a, what I call a, becoming more quotient, like a leadership quotient. So there's four categories. One is the spiritual development and destiny, like mission and vision for what we do as leaders. But then there's IQ, EQ, and personality. So on the IQ, it's like we're born with an IQ. We can't do that, but we maximize our IQ in two ways: through formal and informal education, right? So I think there's PhDs walking around all over the place. They just don't have the formal education, but they're such experts in their field, right? So we
Right.
maximize our IQ through formal and informal education. But secondly, we maximize our IQ through critical thinking skills. And if I was to like just, summarize critical thinking, the first step is debate your first opinion. That's where the other, is there any other way of thinking about it? Is there any other way to look at it? So what I would do is I would pick somebody in my mind who would vehemently disagree with me. And instead of just insulting them, I would say, okay, where are they right? So the first step in critical, what does it mean? What is critical thinking? There's one is that realizing that your interpretation may be missing something. So critical thinking means you're incorporating all truth, right? There's all truth. There's a whole bunch of truth. So when, even with somebody that I'm angry with or don't like, I'm still going to step outside myself. Okay, they are right somewhere, or I'm going to assume they're right somewhere. So automatically my emotions are set aside, and automatically I'm looking and searching for insight, wisdom, and understanding that I don't have. All right. But then when you start incorporating everybody's insight, wisdom, and understanding, because there's a lot of ways to interpret, a lot of ways of looking at it, a lot of information. That's basically critical thinking. It's how did I arrive at my conclusion? And then there's a lot of presuppositions there that are faulty. Well, how do we take care of those? You incorporate if every expert in the field, according to all human knowledge we have on this topic, right? Now, and you can simply do that by just stopping yourself and saying, there's other ways to think about this, and there's more information that I don't have. And by doing so, I can look at it. So there's different models of emotional intelligence. One is the one I use for my dissertation, is a mixed model, which incorporates like the emotional stuff, like self-awareness and others awareness. But then there's an IQ piece of it, which one of them is called reality testing. So there's an IQ piece to this where, am I seeing this situation in reality? Well, what does that even mean? Reality means, am I seeing the situation in 100% truth? Or like, these examples of, like, say, five blind people walk up to an elephant from different vantage points. Well, you say, well, an elephant is, and then define an elephant. Well, there's a whole bunch. You got to look at the whole picture. And that's kind of like what it is. I've literally, one time when I was in leadership and I was upset about something, I would put water bottles on a table and I'd say, okay, this is me, and that's Denise, and that's George or whatever. And I'd say, okay, George thinks this. Where is George right? I think I'm upset with him, but where is he right when his opinion on me? I'm like, you know what? He's right. This is where he's right. He might be wrong here and here, but this is where he's right. So I would just pull the truth out of each water bottle and then combining them together. That's like Bloom's taxonomy. That's exactly the process. Is you break everything down and you bring it back together into a summation of truth. So that's the IQ piece. And I'm probably going on a deep hole here, but that IQ is emotional control the EQ is emotional control. The IQ is that critical thinking process. And that's the way I would suggest the easiest way just to start down the critical thinking road.
And I wanted to ask you, and I can almost hear people when they're talking with you, or, trying to get some answers for themselves or for their wife or spouse or whoever. And I can almost hear, mostly on the male side, to be honest, how long is this going to take? Do you get that a lot?
Rarely, I mean, rarely. I mean, so I would say that people say that the people who seek me out for counseling they wouldn't seek me out unless they wanted to change. So I
Okay,
would
so
say,
they're
I mean,
already most part way there.
yeah.
They just don't know
Well,
how to
yeah,
do
and
it.
they just they want they're seeking. I mean, it's humility just to go to somebody else. With many counselors, there's wisdom. So
Right.
99% of my clients come and they're teachable. They want to know. I do have, of course, the proverbial in your situation, the way you're describing is the wife who kind of drags her husband along. I have had those, and honestly, Denise, that's where my gentle shepherd pastoral love and counseling goes right out the window because I have such little respect for people who have pride. Because what is pride? Pride is saying, honestly, Denise, I have all the information I'll ever need. And my formulas are spot on. So each situation I come across, I'm interpreting it correctly. So no, thank you. So they're not teachable. Pride is
Right, right.
assuming you have all the information you need and all the formulas. And yet I'm looking at them and they're absolute, we say in Texas, bless their heart, right?
Yeah, we
They're,
say it here
they're
too. And by the way,
exactly.
y'all, if we're saying bless your heart, that's not good. If we
Yeah.
say bless your little heart, that means you are too stupid and it can't be washed
I
off.
have no hope. That's exactly it.
None.
Yeah, so I do get those people, and I still deal with them diplomatically. I'm kind of, tongue in cheek a little bit. I deal with them diplomatically, but I bring it to the point where on the spouse that is teachable, I'm like, I'll meet with them separate, say, you have to make a decision because, this isn't changing. What you're experiencing is not, they're just not teachable, they're not open. And you're in a very difficult situation, but those are the situations I feel the worst for. I mean, I have quote unquote fired a few couples just by saying, look, hey guys, I don't think I'm helping you here. But the one spouse knows you're right. And it doesn't matter who it is. Jesus couldn't help us because this person isn't teachable. They're not willing to change. And yeah, there are those people out there, but 99% of the clients I work with are wonderful. They want to change, right? Because I mean, it's like even put it in my philosophy of counseling. Successful counseling or coaching or whatever begins and ends with the client. I don't have the power to change anybody. I bring my books together, and because I believe in I have a good system of in whatever area. So look, I'm here to help you and equip you. But if you don't want it, I mean, no skin off my back. I can't do anything about that. But I'm here to equip you if you want to be equipped.
Exactly. And we are running out of time. Why is taking action more powerful than simply reading about relationship tools? And you mentioned some tools and things that you have in the book. Both books,
um,
actually.
Yeah, there's another proverb that says, he who basically doesn't apply the truth is like a man who goes, looks at his face in the mirror, walks away, and immediately forget what he looks like. It's basically you're given truth, and the action solidifies the principle, right? You never hear like, I had to get it from my head down to my heart. The action is what solidifies agreement with the truth and the disagreement with your mindset. And the action is what actually changes your mental model. Because if you hear truth and you say, yeah, I've got to work on that, but yet you don't act and practice and work on it, then basically that's literally foolishness.
Yeah, it was
That's
a
what
good
foolishness
idea,
is.
but you have
Yeah.
no intention to do anything about it.
Right. Right.
About it. And reading and I read the first book again before we jumped onto this call. I read it over the weekend. I've read it when I get these books, I read them two and a half times, three times. I kind of glance through it when it first gets here. Then week or two before we're going to come on the show, I'm going to review the book. So I read it cover to cover. And then the weekend before we come on the show, I read it again. Maybe not cover to cover, but I've got my little sticky notes and I'm going over the parts that really resonated with me. I've read your book at least four times, the first
Wow.
book. So there's
Thank you.
obviously something in there for me.
I mean, if it's any, consolation, I wrote the thing and I'm still right because obviously imagine like from my vantage point, I have those epiphanies where I'm giving counsel to clients and the first thing that comes to mind is Greg, you desperately need to apply what you're telling them,
Mm.
you know.
And we can, and I understand what you're saying because we can say, well, I already know this. But then it's like so many things that are easy for us, we don't really practice them.
Yeah, well, the practice and what I find too is that we want to practice them, but it's also like in some cases it's a timing thing that
Mm-hmm.
it's, there's some things I have to take care of first, but a lot of people like the principles in the couples book. I tell every couple, look, like the communication skills. I said, I'm going to tell you that you guys will absolutely suck at applying these skills. I mean, you will. But what I find is the first thing that starts to improve in the couple is the amount of time it takes for them to recover. So because again, we're emotional, and when we're emotional, we go from the frontal lobe where these new techniques are found to the amygdala, where fight or flight. But so it's hard to apply them. But when we step back for a few minutes and then calm down, it's almost like I wish I had a V8 moment, because we say, okay, I did it again. And it's through that they recover more quickly, because they go from subjective to objective, because they just like, oh my gosh, we did it again. So in session, I'll ask it, hey, do you guys have an opportunity to use the skills and how to go? Then we'll literally go back to when I call it green and green, when they're both, everything's fine. I need to add this to my second edition of the couples book. We're both green, and then somebody goes yellow, right? And then that's when things start to escalate. So we go back to when there's green. It's okay, right then when you went yellow, this is the skill you need to incorporate. So every exchange equipping their mental model. So eventually they do get it, right? And especially once they start realizing that, my spouse is wonderful and not the spawn of Satan, right? Because
Are
they're so
you
defensive.
sure? Are you really?
Exactly.
Are you
Well, no, there are
positive?
those too, right? There are those too. But
I
once I
suspect
recognize,
I was the one that was the spawn of Satan. I hate to say
yeah, and
it.
there are those, it sounds like you experience. But recognizing that my spouse really does want me to be safe, and they're not attacking me, so it's my
Right,
security,
right.
right? So once we like let down those defensive mechanisms and start, just training ourselves through the action to incorporate, then things start to really improve. And I've seen some wonderful works, and I've also seen, like, honestly, just couples with some low EI, and they just don't get to the point of change because they cannot step outside of themselves. It's sad, but I've been meeting with some couples for a few years.
Oh, that's well, at
Bless
least
their little
so
hearts.
bless her. Ooh, bless her little hearts.
Bless their little hearts. Yeah.
I read this in somewhere in the book, and I didn't write down what page it was, but my question was, what does a healthy intervention look like between partners?
A healthy intervention, I would say, is when they had negative emotion, the first, I say this, the first, if you apply this one skill, you'll never have an escalation again, and that's stop and schedule. So once somebody, let's say it's green, yellow, orange, and then red, once you guys get to, let's say, orange, you're recognizing that we're at the point of no return. Go Kansas, if you know the band, the album. But the point of no return, then you need to stop and then say, okay, we're emotional. Let's revisit this in an hour, 2 hours, next, whatever it is. So if you're able to do that, that's the intervention that stops, so you don't cause, because they stop causing further damage. And so if you can do that, then you can come back to it. And then there's other skills like, okay, let's come back to this, and let's say use couples dialogue. So man, if you're able to stop now, I have found, Denise, that every couple, one spouse, and actually normally is the introvert, one spouse is really good at stopping. Let's say, okay, I need to stop and think through this, because they need
Yep.
internal processors.
But then if you have
And
a partner who says, no, we're going to take care of this now, I'm telling you,
exactly. So
resentment
active problem solver,
builds.
the extrovert. So the
Right.
extrovert, I mean, again, both emotional goals are valid. I tell the extrovert,
No,
look,
they're
if I'm an
not. I was
extrovert,
right. He was wrong.
well, it's a look. Well, what they feel is
I'm
this.
joking,
So
but you know
yeah,
what I mean. I
yeah,
mean, when I tell you back off, we'll talk about this later. I need to breathe, and that doesn't
yes.
happen, things can go bad very, very quickly.
Exactly, because the extrovert will sit there and say, you were able to say what you wanted to say, but as soon as that's one. Secondly, is when are we going to talk
Yeah.
about this again
Okay,
later?
I'm
You
having
mean never?
flashbacks. I'm having
Right.
flashbacks. This is not
So
good.
so I tell whoever wants, I mean, sometimes the extrovert stops too. I said, whoever stops, everything is answered. You say, listen, is just give a time to revisit it. So the introvert just say, I'll just give me an hour, 2 hours, whatever. Let's come back together at 5. That soothes the savage beast of the extrovert wanting to
Right.
solve it, because they say, okay, good, thank you, because now I have a commitment to actually solve it. That's the blend right there.
I wish more people would do that. I really do.
Yeah, I do too. Right?
It's like everybody just calm down, take a break. You take your ball to your corner, I'll take mine over here to my corner, and we'll meet again at dinner time. Goodbye. That's it.
Yes. Yes.
But it doesn't happen easily, does it?
No, no, because we're emotional and opposites attract, and we have different ways of approaching things, and right. So it's just I don't get wigged out. Like people, I always try and trust people's motives, right? Both want to be safe. Now, again, there's people that have bad motives, but in my mind, I want to assume pure motives first. And if we just assume pure motives, that we just have to figure out a pathway forward. But if we don't assume pure motives, now it gets really ugly. And that's where everybody camps on, is we judge each other's hearts. Well, once we're there, it's too hard to recover with just a technique, because at the core, I just don't trust your heart. So trust your spouse's motives. They want you to be safe. You want them to be safe. And we just have to figure out, the techniques or whatever in order to, keep at bay our emotions and then really feel heard and understood. Because again, if we fully understood each other, would we be okay? Yes. So the goal becomes not to prove your point, self promotion. The goal becomes to understand. Like, I get you. And when I understand you, I like you, right? That's what I
Yeah.
married.
Yeah, right. I have one last question. What
Mhm.
is one key message that you hope readers will take away from this particular book?
With IQ for couples, the key message would be that with safety and pursuit, you want each other to be safe, and you want to both feel, I've never been in love like this before. Trust that, seek counseling, and get equipped with techniques.
Good.
It'll
Yeah.
work. It'll work.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg, thank you so much for being with us here today. What's next for you? I know you mentioned an upcoming book and you'll come back for that, right?
Yes, ma'am, of course. Yeah. And so thank you, for it was an honor. So yeah, IQ for leaders, and I'm getting through the process of finalizing it now. So hopefully it might be out this fall. But that's next. And then I want to write a book on how to feel forgiven, because a lot of
Ooh,
us have regrets, a lot of us have hurts and
yeah.
pains, but how
Yeah.
do we truly feel restored? The issue isn't like I haven't forgiven myself, because that's just dumb. It's a matter of, I want to feel restored, and that the mistakes of my path are no longer on my ledger. How do I feel forgiven? That's the next book after that.
That one I definitely want to read. We all have trouble with that. It's like, oh, you did something silly when you were a kid. And listen, my brother died about 3 years ago. He was a double lung transplant. And he passed away after about 8 years of having two new lungs.
Mm,
But the final conversation that we had, and you just kind of brought it back, is that I knew he was dying. He basically told us that he was quitting dialysis that day, and we all knew that he had about 2 or 3 days to live. Nobody
right.
argued with him. It was his decision. He was
Yeah.
in a lot of pain
Yep.
and he wasn't doing well. So I called him and I said, listen, can I record this? And he said, sure. And I was never able to speak with him again. He failed very,
Uh,
very quickly. But we started talking. We forgave each other for silly things that happened when
right.
we were kids. And I would say, do you remember? He said, no, it didn't happen that way. And that's when I realized that we had very different perspectives of the
Yep.
same exact thing.
Yep.
But I also recognized through that conversation with my terribly missed brother that what I thought was just God awful, something that I had done, he was like, "That's no big deal."
Yeah. Isn't that
Really?
amazing?
I've had
Yep.
this guilt all of these years and it was no big deal.
Yeah. And we all experience that. So yeah, I always say that, when we're all, I know, on our deathbed, sucking on that oxygen, the only thing that's going to
Yeah,
matter is going to be our relationships.
that's exactly right. Well, listen, I hate to let you go, but we have to. So everybody, in this episode of Your Partner in Success Radio, Greg Stewart joined us to share powerful insights from his new book, I cubed.
I cubed. I
I,
cubed.
I,
Yep.
I do that
Right.
every single time. I
It's okay. It's
cubed
okay.
for couples facing our negative emotions to build intimacy in marriage. And in this conversation, we drove into the I cubed method: identify, interpret, and intervene and how it helps couples face difficult emotions, build emotional safety, which he stressed a lot, and strengthen connection. And we discuss why avoiding discomfort can damage relationships. And this is not just in marriage, this is everywhere you go. And how emotional intelligence fuels intimacy, and how conflict, when approached with care, can actually bring couples closer. So Greg offers a compassionate, practical roadmap for couples who are really ready and willing to do the deeper work together. So if you are ready to strengthen the emotional foundation of your relationship, grab your copy of I Cubed for Couples. It's I3 if you're looking for the title, I Cubed for Couples by Dr. Greg Stewart. And it's available now on Amazon, and it's free with Kindle Unlimited. Both of his books are. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who could benefit from a deeper, more connected partnership. Greg, any final thoughts before I reluctantly let you go?
No, it's always an honor and a pleasure, Denise, and look forward to future times together. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Your books to me are just amazing. Well, listen, everybody, subscribe to Your Partner in Success Radio for more conversations that matter. Go find these books, and I will see you next week. Greg, thank you.
And thank you, Denise. Bless you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Get your voice heard. If you would like to launch your own far-reaching podcast, contact Denise Griffitts at yourofficeontheweb.com and go to the podcast tab.